Okay, everybody, welcome back to In Progress, our weekly roundtable discussion of the political stories and issues and ideas that are top of mind for progressive people all across the Lone Star State as we head for the weekend. My name is Chris Mosier. I'm the communications director here at Progress, Texas. And if you're listening to us on the radio, we welcome you to KPFT FM 90.1 FM in our brand new time slot, Friday mornings at 10 a.m. So glad to be here. About Progress, Texas, we're a statewide nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions, operating a major digital network, including social media, podcasts, and legacy media that reaches millions of people all across Texas every month. And Progress is also heard on Sundays on KPFT HD2, 11 a.m. In case you didn't get enough from this first go-round. Joined this week by Executive Director Kathleen Thompson. Hi, KT.
Hey folks, happy weekend.
And Advocacy and Development Coordinator Tatum Owens. Hi, Tatum.
Happy to be here. Thanks, y'all.
So happy you're here too. So it's been a wild week. It's always a wild week. We should really just stop saying that. It's always a wild week. It's a little bit redundant to say so.
It's been a week.
Yeah, not wild week. Yeah.
It has certainly been a week. And to me, the overarching theme of this week, in spite of the fact that we have, possibly seen the beginning of World War III, which is something that we probably won't get much to right now for the moment, is the fact that if you ask me, we're seeing lots of signs all around from different directions and different storylines that our voting rights could possibly be in big trouble as we head for the November midterm election, and maybe even as we head towards the runoffs, handful of runoffs happening in Texas that will go down in just a few weeks coming up in May. I think let's start with Kathleen. The first part of this story centers around Dallas, which is where Kathleen is stationed. We've learned earlier on taping day that the Dallas County Democratic Party has dropped a lawsuit that they had in play about what happened on primary election night back a couple of Tuesdays ago now. Kathleen, take that away and tell us what's happened and how it's developed.
So the Dallas County Democratic Party has announced that they are abandoning their lawsuit. The quote from Dallas County Democratic Party Chair Cardell Coleman that went out today on recording day says, in part, the Texas GOP has held a 30-year stranglehold on this state. And what a good way to put it, Cardell. In that time, they have weaponized Texas law to disenfranchise millions of Texans because they know if every eligible voter has access to the polls, they lose. And he goes on to say that it's just going to be a massive cost. Resources are better spent on the ground protecting voters, and that the hyper-partisan system is already rigged. And I want to remind listeners that something that we've been saying for years, the courts are not going to save us.
Right.
Republicans have been voting and not skipping any ballot items. And unfortunately, the Texas Supreme Court is full of injustice. So the county party says that they will proceed and use resources for on the ground work, those door knocks, those community events, and that type of thing versus legal fees.
So we released a blog on this. I think it was last week. It's like Chris said, it's always a wild week. But from the background, Texas already ranks as one of the lowest states amongst all 50, right there at the bottom for voting access and voting rights. And like Kathleen said, that is not an accident. This is and to Cardell's point, decades of a stranglehold of policy choices and bills that have passed to make it harder to vote in Texas. And this was just a very recent example, not even put through by the legislature, but by a local Republican party. And because of that, the Democratic Party, because of state law, the Democratic Party had to do the exact same thing, which was enact precinct voting on election day, making it harder, changing people's routines that they've had in place for years for the simple act of causing confusion on election day when people are strapped for time, but still want to make their voices heard and show up to the polls.
And to be clear, this isn't going to happen in November. This isn't going to happen with the general election. I've had a lot of questions about that. Is this going to happen in any other counties outside of Williamson or Dallas? Well, it's not even going to happen in Dallas in Williamson County in November. So this is just something that happened in the primary because Republicans could throw a wrench. They did. Mm-hmm. If they can disenfranchise voters, slow momentum, confuse people, frustrate people, maybe hope it's so frustrating that they won't come back in November. They could, so they did.
The overarching theme here is that it appears that Republicans are afraid of too many people voting. As Kathleen likes to say, too much democracy.
That's right.
They consider to be something that they're really not into. And to back up, just for context, just a little bit, all the stuff that happened in Dallas, just in case you may have missed it, and please don't miss it, by the way, please do educate yourself on what has happened here.
Right.
As Tatum mentioned, an effort undertaken by the Dallas County and Williamson County Republican parties to make voting more difficult and more confusing. It resulted in exactly what they sought, which is confusion, people showing up at the wrong place to vote, a lot of people ending up not getting to vote on time, which 7 p.m. is when everybody's supposed to be in line to do this. An extension filed by a local judge there in Dallas to let people vote a little bit longer. Ken Paxton, our attorney general, complaining about that to the Texas Supreme Court, as Kathleen mentioned, all Republican for a long, long time. And so thus, a bunch of uncounted votes. This is the crux of the lawsuit that we're talking about, that the Dallas County Democratic Party has decided that they're not going to throw more money into this black hole of injustice that the Texas Supreme Court basically has turned into in this regard. They know they're not going to win, so why spend the money? It's sad to say that this makes perfect sense, that they've made the right call by not trying to go through the proper channels in the courts to get justice, because in Texas, frankly, those proper channels don't really exist. So that was last week and really developing up until today. On top of all that, we have this whole thing going on in Washington, D.C. with our senior senator, John Cornyn. And to me, there's as much comedy in this story as there is tragedy, to be honest with you here. And to back up a little bit to the beginning of this, last week, I guess it was, Ken Paxton, who is now in a runoff with John Cornyn for the Republican nomination for the U.S. Senate, made a pledge that if John Cornyn would help to kill the filibuster in the Senate and thus allow the Senate to pass the Save America Act, that he would drop out of the race. This is while we're seeing polling, recent polling, and polls are polls, it's a snapshot in time and all that. But while we're seeing polling that indicates that whether Donald Trump endorses John Cornyn or not, Paxton's got the total edge in this case. So Paxton's offering to drop out of a race that he appears to be winning in order to coerce John Cornyn to reverse a long-standing, decade-standing position of support of the filibuster in the U.S. Senate, because it preserves some degree of defense and control for the minority party in that body. Without the filibuster, the minority party is just completely locked out and has no power whatsoever, really. So we've seen this big reversal by John Cornyn. The punchline for the moment for me is that John Cornyn is also saying that this has nothing to do with the Trump endorsement. This has nothing to do with Paxton's challenge. He's just simply changed his mind. It is a joke.
So Texas actually had its own version of the SAVE Act now before Congress, and that stalled. We were lucky to not see that go through and be put into law, although it was put to our ballots as well last November in 2025. So now we see the SAVE Act, which basically it would put forward a lot of hard bureaucratic obstacles to voting, including providing documentary proof of citizenship. So that means like bringing your social security number or ID to the polls with you, and your name would need to be the exact same thing on there. If it doesn't, your vote could be counted out, right? That's kind of the background there. But federal law already asserts that you would have to be a U.S. citizen to vote. So that leaves you with the question of, what is this actually about?
Exactly. So Cornyn has reversed himself on the filibuster. He's decided that the filibuster is a good idea after all, since now Ken Paxton and Donald Trump would like him to do so. But he's insisting that he's not doing that because of pressure from Ken Paxton, or because he wants the endorsement of Donald Trump that probably wouldn't help him win the runoff anyway. To answer your question, though, non-citizen voting is what this is all about. It's the specter of the Democratic Party for years has been not only, welcoming in millions and millions of undocumented people. The Biden border crisis, as they call it, is to gain voters to come in and illegally vote in our elections by the millions. The fact of the matter is, this is a complete falsehood. This is something that does not happen hardly ever. I feel like there's been a review pretty recently where they found something like 5.
Time and time again, this is a statistic and a lie. It's just this narrative that is meant to scapegoat immigrants. And you see right now also Trump telling House Republicans, to back off of anti-immigrant messaging, because it doesn't work. America is a country of immigrants. And right there at this moment, you're seeing people getting pulled off the streets and just crazy violence.
It's a situation that Democrats, I think, find to be amazing that anyone would try to push such a stupid idea, but it does tend to work a little bit, Tatum, in terms of stoking people's racism and stoking people's xenophobia in terms of, riling up the base, keeping MAGA fired up. That is part of all of this, and that's the reasoning. It's sexy to some of those people, and that's why it keeps coming up, and that's why they've tried to build policy around it.
Chris had a question in one of our staff meetings at some point in the last 2 weeks about why this rise in Islamophobia has been spouted by a lot of Republicans currently. And I think it's connected to that message from Trump telling people back off of this immigrant group and focus on this immigrant group instead, right? Or this racial group and so on and so forth. Who can we make the other so that the people in our base feel safe? But you're right, it leads to these really horrific outcomes. Like today, someone drove into a synagogue I saw. It's
Yes.
These kind of, that rhetoric does not go nowhere. It leads to really horrible outcomes.
And of course, this all relates to the recent war that has been started in Iran, in the Middle East, which of course is the global seat of Islam. And so I think there's something about that. There's definitely a connection. I didn't see it coming. I don't know if Greg Abbott somehow saw it coming, that we were going to be attacking Iran pretty soon. So maybe now is the time to, rile up people against Muslims as much as we possibly can. It almost seems like a grand plan, but I'm not going to get too terribly conspiratorial about it just yet.
I wanted to chime in on the solution in search of a problem, because I've got
Sure.
some numbers in front of me from the nonpartisan Brennan Center for Justice that found 0 point, and had to put on my glasses for folks listening at home, 0 point, because there's a lot of zeros, 0.0001% of 23.5 million votes cast were suspected non-citizen votes. And federal law already prohibits non-citizens from voting in federal elections, with penalties including up to 5 years in federal prison and
Right.
potential deportation. So just to be clear, we talked about this a little bit last week. 50% of Americans don't have a passport.
Right.
And
That's right.
the federal government is not going to be mailing out passports free of charge for folks. So who does this impact? It doesn't impact wealthy Americans. It impacts the working citizens of this country. And why would we want to put up barriers? So that they don't vote.
Right. Right. It's a class thing. We've talked about how things are not really left versus right. Things are really top versus bottom. Let's think for a second about the people who are pushing this idea. Well, of course, everybody has a passport. Of course, everybody, summers in Spain. The type of person who, let's go ahead and give them the benefit of the doubt. In their world, everybody does have a passport. In their world, you had a passport when you were, 9 years old, when you went on your first trip to Europe. These are the type of people who are writing our laws. These are the type of people who would like to stay in control. Thus, these are the type of people who don't think twice. Again, we've seen multiple instances about making sure that as many people who are not like them have a difficult time voting.
This is the Lucille Bluth of Arrested Development saying, how much could a banana cost? $10? Yeah. Sure, you're so out of touch. But it's not that they don't know, like
Right.
Lucille. They do know, and they do know what they're doing, and they're lying, and they want to keep people from voting. So what we're doing is trying to make sure that people are aware, and to give you the numbers and the messages to share with your friends and family, so that when the SAVE Act comes up at your weekend picnic, that you know what's happening.
Absolutely. There's also, Tatum, I'm going to kick it to you on a development really just over the last couple of hours. Something that should be good news for all of us. Something that should be great in terms of folks who have tried to go out there and tried to buy a home in the last few years and have just had your eyes popped and your jaw dropped.
Tell me about it.
At how much it costs. Kathleen has just gone through this experience. It is not fun. It is extremely, housing is, super, super expensive, as we know. That's just one part of the overall affordability pie that we're all, very much centered on and focused on these days. There is actual, get a load of this, bipartisan legislation. Can you imagine that? where there has been Republicans and Democrats agreeing on something that, hey, we need to do something about the cost of housing. And so there is this big housing bill that just a couple hours ago, I think, overwhelmingly passed bipartisan vote through the U.S. Senate. It's highly popular. Now, and I'm going to now this is really going to blow your mind. I'm going to give Donald Trump a little bit of credit for just a second. Donald Trump has spoken against corporate ownership of single family homes, which I think also is a terrible idea. And that's part of this bill. Part of this bill puts some caps on that and does some things about that, basically to make it easier for folks like, all of us and you and me, dear listener, to get ourselves into housing at some kind of an affordable rate. It should be immediately signed by the president, but it's not going to be. And why is that, Tatum?
Yeah, so President Trump is withholding his vote until the SAVE Act passes, because if it's harder to vote, then we can have affordable housing. But only then. This bill sponsored by, it's like Chris said, it's bipartisan, kind of feels crazy. Didn't think that we did that anymore. Yep. It's sponsored by Senators Tim Scott. He's a Republican, South Carolina. Elizabeth Warren, you know her name, Democrat of Massachusetts. Yep. And just leaders of the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. So all of it would amount to some major changes to creating a more affordable housing industry here in the U.S. One thing that I was excited about, this is just like a byline in the very bottom of the article from the New York Times, but if passed, it would provide guidance to local zoning issues, which here in Texas, I'm like, Houston has no zoning. Austin just reworked its zoning a couple of years ago when they had their own mini housing crisis, and now rent is down for like 2 years. So I would love to see some policies put forward by this bill, which would include cracking down on huge investment firms and developers that have bought out single family properties, along with major changes to how affordable it is to finance a house, like Kathleen was talking about. Very hard right now, especially in Texas. So it could be very interesting, but once again, there's that dynamic of the president withholding his signature in the passage of this legislation contingent on his other priorities of, well, I'm going to do voter suppression first.
So this housing measure has sailed through the Senate, and thank you, Senator Elizabeth Warren. I voted for you in the presidential primary. But the future is uncertain amid demands from hardliners. So President Trump could put his thumb on the scale and give his blessing to what has happened in the Senate. And of course, the House would fall in line because the Republican ideology in the House is whatever he said.
And that's part of the same mechanism. Where, if Trump decides that the SAVE Act is something that he can actually get, that's when his favorability about this bill is going to influence whether or not it gets through the House. So it is kind of part of the same machine that Trump is very much in control of. And let's be real clear about this. This is something that would be great for just about everyone in America. It's a good idea. It's something that should happen. It is going to be held hostage by the president, who wants to be able to influence unduly the midterm election. That if he doesn't do that, and the way he sees it, he has said himself that he guarantees a GOP outcome, a favorable GOP outcome if they get the Save America Act. He guarantees big trouble if they don't. He sees this as the key to staying in control and staying out of scrutiny and out of investigation and out of impeachment and all those other things that may come starting next year. Should the Democrats overperform in the midterms, as they're right now almost guaranteed to do, it would appear, but by all indications, they seem to be, in line for a major slacking of the Republicans at this point. So it's Trump's last gasp. It's his last hope, really. He's made no secret of that. And so this terrific idea that could help tons of Americans, millions of Americans could end up in a home that they couldn't afford otherwise. That's going to be held hostage. They are going to the Republicans will try to spin this as the Democrats blocking this terrific housing opportunity for America. The fact of the matter is they have this other thing in play that's in advance of this housing bill that is about undermining the election. That's what they really want. This other thing is a carrot. So sticking with the U.S. House, and someone who's been in the news a whole bunch lately is, of course, Dallas Representative Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. who, let me reiterate this. We said some of this on last week's show. During the entire time that she was running for the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate, she was also still doing her job as a U.S. congressperson, and she is continuing to do that job right now in terrific fashion, as she is known to do. I really hope none of our listeners at this point have a shellfish allergy, because where we're going is going to be difficult for you. If you don't want to talk about such things, Kathleen, what did Congresswoman Crockett discover in the shellfish category this week?
While Trump and his minions were cutting SNAP and health care for working families and for families like us, Pete Hegseth spent $2 million. Like, how do you even $2 million on king crab, $7 million on lobster tails? How do you
What?
spend that much money? And 100,000 on a grand piano. This is where our taxpayer dollars are going, and this was supposed to be the Doge targeting of waste, fraud, and abuse,
yeah.
right?
Well, remember, that's gone now, so.
Is this all for him? I don't understand. Is this like fancy dinners for everyone?
The Pentagon budget shows that Pete Hegseth and his Department of Defense, which he has a different name, just like the gold has been renamed, but having a Sharpie and making a weather pattern and a hurricane go somewhere else doesn't make it so. That's not how things work.
Yeah.
The Pentagon budget reports show that Pete Hegseth spent $93 billion in 1 month, making it the highest monthly expense since 2008. The budget report included spending $2 million on Alaskan king crab.
Oh my God. It's just, I grew up in San Antonio, military town, USA. And so there's a meme basically at this point. It's kind of like the pizza index, where if military members are getting a rich meal with lobster and king crab rolls, we're going to war. And look where we are now. Look where he brought us. He brought us to that department. He made it happen with your gas prices as evidence, right?
I have a social hang up that I'm going to just share with you guys and all of our listeners real quick. I am of the class of person who never properly learned how to eat lobster and king crab. Like, I don't know how to crack into it properly and get all that meat out of there. So, and the rare occasions when,
because of that ocean by Lubbock.
Yeah, exactly. I was very much a landlocked kid, up in the Panhandle area up there. So yeah, this is a highly, the fact that I can't hardly get half of the meat out of a piece of one of these dishes just tells me even more that specialized training is required to even consume this much seafood. They basically are running a little kingdom, aren't they? They basically, we're in a situation where we have an elected monarch and his court. It's a let them eat cake moment if there ever was one. It's funny, and it's also completely disgusting and tragic at the very same time.
It's a don't let them eat anything. I mean,
right.
I saw the news story about someone who called in to C-SPAN and was talking about how she can't afford to eat and about how benefits were being cut and how she's losing weight, not because she intends to. I mean, it's just disgusting. And of course, we're a nonprofit. We're not wasting people's tax dollars, but I remember sweating buying a coffee maker with Stevie. Like, can we afford to have a coffee maker at the office?
Our administrator. Hi, Stevie.
Right. Like, I know other people have wellness retreats and stuff that, like, this is a coffee maker. Is this an okay expense? And the waste and the fraud and the abuse that is so rampant. And it's our tax dollars, and it's a choice. It's our funds are not going to be spent on our neighborhood public schools, and our funds aren't going to be spent to make sure that the roads that we drive are safe, and that the water that we drink is clean, and that there is water to come out of the tap.
Which we'll go there here in just a second. But real quick, as we're watching the war footage again tonight, as we're watching the Iran war show on the evening news tonight, every single one of those American missiles that you see go up, as Kathleen talks about, that's a highway, that's a school, that's a water system that is literally going up in smoke in a war of adventure that just about nobody except for Donald Trump himself really wanted to see happen. So back to the water thing here as we begin to close down here. Let's get through this fairly quickly. You know, I've actually been quite excited to go to Corpus Christi this summer. The Texas Democratic Party convention is going on this summer in Corpus Christi, but there is a scary, scary situation going on down there that should catch all of our attention, not only in Texas, but all across the southern U.S. and really across wide swaths of the U.S. who are now watching their water supplies dry up. Tatum, you want to take that and tell us what's going on in Corpus?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So Dylan Bador with the Texas Tribune, in partnership with, I think it's Climate News, Inside Climate News, released a story. It felt like an expose, I would say, about the impending and current water crisis in Corpus Christi, which basically, if you haven't heard it yet, Corpus Christi is reaching emergency levels of a water drought-induced crisis. This, in combination with Corpus Christi being one of the largest oil and gas hubs for the U.S., makes for a very bad situation for the local people living in Corpus, where for many years now, local water in the region has been sold off to the oil and gas industry that also takes place there. And so without significant rainfall, Bador says Corpus Christi is headed for a water emergency within months. And this is not coming out of nowhere. This is, as Bador puts it, something that has been on the books for about a decade at the very least. They knew that this was coming up. And now we've reached the end point, and there doesn't seem to be solutions that the local city council is taking, that even Greg Abbott is now talking about this and trying to figure out what is going to come for all of us, which is Texas overall needs water immediately. Otherwise, Edwards Aquifer here in Austin and San Antonio region, we're all losing water right now.
That's right. The Edwards serves communities all the way from South Austin all the way to San Antonio, including New Braunfels and San Marcos, and they are about to hit, or they could very soon hit the most dire of all of their drought stages, which is that fourth stage, which has never happened before. And I think that's something to point out. The Edwards, Corpus is in huge trouble for sure. Edwards is right behind them in terms of the drought situation. I love the part, Tatum, where Greg Abbott has decided the solution is a state takeover.
Yeah, because that works so well.
What the hell are you going to do, Greg? I would like to, gosh, it's hard to say. I'm not a Corpus Christi native. I'm not real familiar with their local politics there. There have been solutions that they have worked on and then abandoned. There are solutions on the books now that are just going to take too long to build and implement to make much of a difference, considering the dire straits that they're in. I would say it's fair to say there's been some degree of mismanagement possibly, but I would also say this is a cataclysmic situation that could very well be beyond any reasonable human control at all. We're talking about the climate changing. We're talking about the planet coming loose underneath our feet. I mean, what the hell's the state going to do?
And I would push back against that to say that there are measures that can and have been taken, like you just noted. Like one of the major points that Bador addresses in this article is basically the misaddressing of funds towards desalination as the only way to address this issue, when we know that there are other steps that can be taken to, like, importing water, making sure that there is an infrastructure in place to make sure that people that the Corpus Christi doesn't run dry right next to the coast.
Yeah, and desalination seems like it happens in other parts of the world for sure. It's not new technology.
Oh yeah, Greg Abbott took a trip to Israel to go do that. I remember that one. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm curious about that. Now, I have heard environmental pushback against desalination. I don't know the technical ins and outs of that, and that's something we probably ought to all be studying up on, I think, at this point, I suppose.
Finding out.
Because all across Texas, the entire state, there is not a square inch of Texas that is not in dire peril of losing our water, for sure. It's a scary situation, and Corpus is going first. So everybody watch what happens down there.
Before we close, and I know we're getting at the end, but I just want to say for old timers like me, do you remember when Rick Perry prayed for rain? I mean, this was yeah, Tatum's laughing. You're not old enough to remember. Okay. Governor Rick Perry declared days of prayer for rain, April 22nd to April 24th, which was an Easter weekend in 2011, decided that the solution of the Texas legislature was to pray for rain. So in all of the state legislative sessions that we've had since then, that we know that this crisis is coming. What have Republicans done instead? They decided that Harris County, which is the largest county in Texas that has more than 4 million residents, should have one voting ballot drop box.
Right.
Yeah.
They decided that they should scam public school kiddos out of proper education and give money to wealthy Texans. They decided that they want to monitor who goes to the bathroom where.
Yeah, all the top priorities.
So there's been plenty of time to address this, and Kendall Scudder says the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago, but the second best time is today. So there's work that can be done today. They knew that this was coming.
Let's remind ourselves once again that our state has been under solid statewide Republican control for decades. And so things that are going south have done so on statewide Republican watch. And that's just the simple fact of the matter. And so there must be some degree of accountability directed towards the people who have been running the show for a long, long time. As long as Tatum Owens has been walking this earth, I'm pretty close to that.
That's right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So, guys, great talk. Thanks again for the hang today. Tatum Owens, thanks for joining. Kathleen Thompson, thank you once again. I'm Chris Mosier. Our mission at Progress Texas is to improve and save Texans' lives by acting on our shared, bold, progressive values, and that starts with countering the billionaire and corporate-funded conservative disinformation machine. Progress Texas is a statewide nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media in action in the Lone Star State. In Progress also airs here on KPFT Radio in Houston on the HD2 channel every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Catch us then. More info on the radio station at kpft.org and more info on us at Progress Texas at progresstexas.org.